Welcome to Scottish Rugby's training headquarters at Oriam in Edinburgh. Today we are going to be having a deep dive, a conversation with Scottish Rugby's new performance director, David Nucifora. Nucifora, great to have you here. A great opportunity for us to get an idea of how things are looking for you, but I suppose the first question, how are you settling in to Scottish Rugby so far?
Yeah, fine. It's been good. I've had 5 weeks here on the ground, and I've met a lot of people and learnt a fair bit about why people do what they do. So it's been really helpful to me to start sort of shaping and forming some views and opinions.
So, an opportunity then for you to let us know what effectively you have signed up to. What's the remit that you've signed up to and the scale of that, I suppose?
Well, it's I've signed up for a 2-year block, and within that time, my responsibilities sort of oversee the professional game here in Scotland. So that will cover all the national teams, the pro teams, the pathways, the women's game in the same areas. So across the board, it'll cover all of that space, and the ambition is to be able to ensure that all of those areas are being driven and are structured in the appropriate way to grow the performance aspect of rugby in Scotland.
I mean, obviously we've had international games, Scottish Gaff Mansfield, but you've been at regional sessions, regional age grade sessions, club teams, club rugby, professional rugby. You've probably had a good opportunity to take it all in.
Oh, I've seen some different parts of Scotland so far that I never thought I'd see, but it's been good. I mean, that's the. I did some work before I came up here to start to understand people's roles and responsibilities, and then actually trying to get to see it live, and then also get to understand people's opinions on things has been really helpful. So getting out to as much as I can. I've been to some club games, I've been to some of the URC games. I obviously made it in time to watch the November test matches. So it's been a really good cross-section of places and people, and it's been really enjoyable.
Considering then what you're walking into, what you're looking towards over the next 2 years in the first instance, what are your first impressions of what you're inheriting?
I think the first thing that hits home to me, which is probably why I agreed to sort of take the role on, is I see an enormous upside. I see huge potential, and I think that there's lots of things that can be done to improve performance, and I'd be quite excited about that.
What level of performance? In terms of what's your marker for improving performance? I assume that's multi-layer rather than just a top level.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that you don't get improved performance at the top end of the game or sustainable top end performance without making sure that everything underneath it is running effectively and efficiently. So the ability to try and do that or make that happen is where I think that there's a huge potential to improve the sustainability of high performance over a good period of time.
You had 10 years with Ireland in order to achieve what you wanted to achieve there.
Yeah.
It was also a different economical landscape at that point too. The picture may look very different to what you walked into with Ireland, and looking at that with Scottish Rugby, do you feel confident that you're going to be able to move things forward in the direction and that you'll be able to execute your vision?
Yeah, I do. When I walked into Irish rugby, it was coming off the back of the financial crisis, and things were a bit financially paralysed. But I think what we managed to do was to convince people that in high performance it's about investment. It's not expenditure. And if you're doing it in the right way, then what you're actually doing with your money is investing it in what's going to actually improve your outcomes both on the field and off the field. So there was a lot of trust involved in that, and I was given that trust, and we were able to do it over a period of time to be able to turn around the fortunes on the field, but also that had a direct impact on the financial outcomes of the business as well.
There was a lot of excitement in the rugby community about your availability too, and you were, I'm sure, not without your options. You've tapped into it briefly there, but what is it about Scottish rugby that felt like the right fit for you at this point?
Yeah, I saw similarities. The thing that one of the things that sort of drove me up to Ireland in the first place was looking at the opportunity to be able to drive a system that I think can work, and I saw the same here. So it's about using what you've got rather than looking at some things and going, "Oh, poor us, we don't have this or we don't have that." It's looking at what you do have, and I think here the size of the place, both geographically and numerically, is an advantage. But to drive that advantage, you've got to get a few things right, and that's largely around being aligned and being cohesive and being clear about where it is you want to go.
And do you feel that this is from what you've seen over the last 5 weeks already, that this is very much achievable, but also something that can really progress in what feels like a short space of time? I mean, my personal question would be that you've said 2 years, but if it was all going well, could you potentially look to stay on for both sides?
Well, I don't want to jump to that. I've got a wife back in Australia who might
have a thing to say about that.
Have something to say about that. But no, look, I think the role in the initial block of time, the 2 years that I agreed to, is about trying to put the structures and the people in place that can drive this thing. And I think if we focus on that and get that right first, well then that'll lay some solid foundations for what comes after.
And off the back of that, in terms of performance director, obviously, and high performance, it's a long duration. So like, if we talk long term, many people say mid term, long term. What would long term be? Is that like 5 to 8 years in terms of getting? Yeah. If you get the systems in and you get the buy-in, and the support.
Look at the timeline of Ireland.
Is it 5 to 8 years, or is it 3 to 4?
Yeah, I think to be realistic, if you want to get to the point like in Ireland, it certainly didn't happen overnight. Yeah. It had to be driven. So
there'll be ups and downs along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely not linear. Yeah. I think that people have to be realistic about what's got to be done, and then about how long it takes. Even though the advantage of being small is important, you have to. When you're bringing through talent, you have to make sure that it's not going to be in the volume that you've got in other places, but you can make sure that the quality of that talent is top notch, and that might mean that you're feeding through. We might start at 2 or 3 world-class players a year, getting into the system, getting through the system. Well, over 5 years, you're starting to talk about a considerable number, that have the ability not just to play well. For Scotland at international level, but to actually, have the ability to become world-class players. And, I think that's, I don't want to keep comparing to the Irish system, but, that's what's happened. And you've got, every year or two, you've got 1 or 2 world-class players have started to come through, and your James Ryans, your Caelan Dorrises and Andrew Porters and these sorts of boys. That's what you can do here, but that takes time, and you've got to work really hard to get what will seem like a small number of players, but that's what it's all about.
And to retain them as well, to keep them in Scotland too.
Yeah,
where possible.
That's where possible. That's the ideal world. Now, there's a few other challenges with that in the way that the system works here, but they're things that we're going to be, discussing and talking about in the months to come, about what does that look like, or what could it look like, or what's the best thing for Scottish rugby. So, yeah.
Giving us a teaser there.
Yeah. Well, I was just going to jump and say, off the back of those world-class players that you you grow and the number of world class players grow, but the influence that they can have on others within a relatively small system is big as well, isn't it? Like a real
Huge.
contactability, almost a real element of training alongside them, being inspired. Because I think we do have world class players at the moment as well.
Yeah, I've been really encouraged by what I've seen. I've been, as you said earlier, I've been out to some of the regional academy sessions. I've been down in the Borders. I've been up in Dundee. I've been, club games, etc. But I've been encouraged by what I've seen. I think that one of the strongest things you can build is belief. I've said this before with regards to my last role, is that people didn't believe over there early on. They didn't believe it was possible.
Why do you think that was?
I just don't think that. I don't know. I think that might be the difference
Historical,
between my part of the world, where I grew up, and you're taught to believe anything's possible. And I don't know. I just felt that there was a very negative mindset around what you could do or where you can get to. And on my moving out of Ireland, I was asked a question similar to that. What would I be proud of? I think what I was proudest of was the change in mindset of people, of what they could do. And now you have your young players back there seeing what's possible and believing that it's possible and believing that they can beat anyone. And that's achievable, but it takes a lot of committed people and a lot of hard work, but it can absolutely be done.
It's something as well in where there is a benefit there then to the time frame too. The fact that you have to hit the ground running here and you have to make some pretty sharp decisions.
Yeah, I've had 10 years practice, so not that I'm saying that everything that happened there will happen here, because there are nuances, there are differences that you've got to work that out, but I've got to work it out fast, and I'm trying to do that. And that's the reason why I'm out there trying to talk to a lot of people and get a sense of things, a feel for things. But I think that, we're not going to have time to muck around. We're going to have to get into this, and that's exciting. It's challenging, but it's exciting, and people have got to be up for that challenge.
And on that, through the time you spent here, the people you've met, the conversation had, the vision that you'll set, what happens with that vision? How does it become a reality? Is this initial period a fact-finding mission to prepare a report, or how does it become a reality?
What's your process?
We're ready to get into it.
Yeah.
I mean, we have to.
Yeah.
I mean,
So do you drive that?
Yes, that's my job. That's what I've been asked to do. So that's what I'm going to carry out. And I think that I think that in performance sport, people have to be agile and adaptable, and people that are up for that will fit in really well. And we need to find people who are committed and up for that. And most of the people I've met are. I think they just want to know how we're going to do it, how we're going to get there, and that's part of my job to get them to believe that this is the right way to go.
You've got the men's game, you've got the women's game,
Yep.
you've got the pathway programme.
Yep.
Sevens is no longer a feature within Scottish Rugby. I know that's something that's been quite a fairly key component as a pathway process as well too. But in terms of looking at those options, the club game, the grassroots game, there's so much there to select from. Do you feel that you're getting an overview that's giving you all the foundation that you require at this point to make the calls?
Yeah, I do. I mean, it has been a benefit working in this part of the world for the last 10 years, because I do understand a lot of it as to what drives certain things and the decision making that goes on, whether it be in the common competitions or dealing with Six Nations or World Rugby or whatever it is. There's a lot of commonality, so I get that. With regards to sevens in particular, it would have been great to have Scotland as its own entity, but that's not the case. But can we still maximise it and be smart in how we use it? Absolutely. And I think we've got to make sure that we we use everything we can to help expedite the development of Scottish players, and sevens is one of those things that I absolutely believe in can do that. So, you know, I'll be doing my best to make sure that we work really closely with GB to ensure that Scottish players are well represented in those programs, both men and women.
Has anything surprised you in your time since taking up the mantle here, and is there anything that's perhaps stood out, surprised you so far?
How much shorter the days are than Dublin this time of year.
The temperature.
Yeah.
Slightly different.
On that though, like in terms of, it might be quite difficult to answer, but having worked up here a long time and alongside World Rugby, you know, boards and communities with Scottish Rugby and Six Nations and URC, the whole thing, obviously coaching against Scotland as well and Scottish players, your perception of what Scotland was and the reality of what you found, is it quite similar, or are you surprised at some things and maybe less surprised at others?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, look, the national team, I think, has performed well over a number of years. I would know, coming here with the Irish and with Australian teams over the years, that it was always an incredibly difficult place to come and play. And so I know that the potential of the team here is very high.
You also know the mindset of the opposition coming.
Well, I know, I definitely know that, and I know there's a lot of respect.
Yeah.
You know, when you come here to play, there's a huge amount of respect in that regard. So you know you're going to be up for a real fight, and you're going to have to perform really well to win. I think, again, what we've got to try and do here is make sure that we work out how do you get consistently good performances, that you don't just, you're not just happy with, you know, knocking off a high-ranking team occasionally. How do you do it on an ongoing basis? Because that's what you've got to aspire to do.
It's also how you win, how you win the prizes.
Well, it is, yeah. You've got to be consistent, and so what makes you consistent? You know, there's behaviours, there's structures, there's a whole lot of things that go towards, you know, building that. Yeah.
And just one, I know we come on to the emerging Scotland fixture, we have a bit, while I've got you in rugby chat, what do you see changes in the game, trends in the game? I know you've been involved for a long number of years at the forefront of how the game's going to be. Without a crystal ball, where do you see the perfect, all rugby really, being mirrored by what you see at the top bit? Are we going into fewer replacements, a more aerobic game? Is it going to be as power-based as it is now, with potential law changes going forward? If you could fast forward 5 years, where do you see the game?
Well, I think you need all-rounders. You need all-round athletes. You know, the game has changed. Now, you can't have tight forwards these days that don't have the ability to be able to play in the open. That they have to have a passing game. They have to be able to be agile in defence. They've got to be able to then obviously do their core roles really well. So you've got to have all-round players. I also think that when you look at, you know, players, you know, some of the Springbok players at the moment with regards to where the game's gone with size, you know, sure, there's big men involved in the game, and people, you know, often go on about, you know, the forward replacements that come on, but you know, you look at the Cheslin Colbys of the world, and these guys, they have an unbelievable impact on the game, and so, you know, we don't want to get carried away with just big bodies all the time. We need to understand how you create space on a field, and because at international level of the game, there's very little space. So how do you actually find space? And sometimes it's just that explosive nature and agility of athletes like that have a part to play in the game. So we've got to be really. We've got to have a really open mind about what it is we're looking for to get an advantage, and what have we got access to here in Scotland. What type of athletes do we have? You know, and I think Scotland already do a pretty good job with regards to understanding, you know, in the national team what style of game they need to play. But we've got to go and keep searching for the right type of players.
But you also mentioned cohesion there as well earlier on. Cohesion is essential, and being able to replicate that not just at at tier 1 of the elite pathway, but also right through for that path, and having consistency.
Well,
too.
that's in the DNA of the country. You know, it's. I think if you were to ask a club rugby fan, they would say that's what they would like to try and play like. That's the kind of athletes that we produce in the past. So
we're speaking to a back as well.
Well,
so
I know. Well, we've got a front row on about sevens. This is brilliant.
We're covering all bases here.
It's exciting because that's a kind of collective approach in terms of not just following a blind trend that's winning at the moment. Hargy Simon's one of the biggest guys, and he's the first that's going to look for space and offload and get his hands free. So not just being blinded by size or power or the speed and agility of Chels and Colby. It's getting all-round players with a skill set that in 1 week that'll be the demand, but the next week the structure of the game might be totally different, and that comes through longevity and development from the bottom up.
He's a good example for Ireland as well.
Understanding what talent is as well.
Yeah.
I mean, that was one thing that we worked hard on in the last role, was to get people to understand what people are good at. It's too easy to look at someone and go, oh, they can't do this or they can't do that. And really, if you've got something that a player excels at, then we need to take that and grasp that. I mean, places like Scotland and Ireland and Australia, they're not South Africa or England or France. So, when you've got a positive attribute of someone, you've got to really be able to grab hold of that and say, well, how can I utilise that? How can I make it better? And then what can I do to be able to build around that, to make that player a better player, build it around what already his super strength might be.
Before we sort of finish off on Emerging Scotland as well, I find it's interesting that it was such an attractive prospect coming to Scotland as well, when the player pool, the participation numbers here don't reflect other parts, particularly in the Southern Hemisphere, where you could potentially look at it being an easier opportunity to be able to transition and make change. Yeah,
I mean, every place has its own challenges. Australia has lots of challenges, the competition for athletes with all the other sports. So every place does have its own challenges. But I think that what I am used to is making sure that when you identify players, that you put everything into developing them to make sure that you give them every possible chance to reach their potential. So now that puts a lot of pressure on you to make good choice.
Identification process.
Yeah, you got to make good choice, and because it's not cheap to develop a player when you look at human resource and the cost and everything else that goes into it. And
it's more than just skill as well. It's more than just skill. That you're buying a you're buying a mindset too.
You've got to understand all of those things that are important to what's going to make someone successful at the top end of the game. And I think that, we've got to start to think on a global scale. We've got to stop, thinking about what good looks like locally. You've got to understand what good looks like internationally, because that's the game that you're in. It's an international game. So we've got to start comparing ourselves to the best and not just be content with thinking this is okay around here.
An opportunity then this weekend for some of Scotland's young emerging talent, literally Emerging Scotland taking on Italy under 23s.
Yep.
Matches like this are then surely crucial components of executing that vision of trying to make sure that we're bringing the right players through, giving them the right opportunities. And so how important are these games then?
They're really important. I think that player development is a combination of development programs and competition structures, and you've got to get them both right. You can't have it too heavily weighted in either area. So if you've got the best programs in the world, they've got to be complemented by the playing programs that stretch players, because if you're going to make someone better, you've got to be challenging them all the time. And the appropriate level of matches that a young player will play has to be spot on. There's no point in them playing games that don't challenge them, that don't stretch them. So we've got to find opportunities to be able to do that. That area, that space that Emerging Scotland is really trying to target is that post under 20s. Now, there might be a couple of younger boys involved this weekend, but primarily we're looking at that 20 to 25 type age group, players that might not be accessing enough high-level game time in the two pro teams. So how do we do that? Well, we find games like this, we find matches similar to this. We're investigating other, pro team A fixtures that are going to stretch players. So